The first scientific surprise did not come from DNA, blood, or carbon dating. It came from a camera. The Shroud of Turin is a linen cloth bearing faint frontal and dorsal images of an injured man. Many believers see Jesus. Historians face a problem. The cloth has no verified history reaching back to 1st century Jerusalem. Its confirmed public record begins in Lille, France, in the mid-1350s. Then, in 1898, Italian photographer Secondo Pia photographed the shroud. When he developed the plate, the faint figure appeared with startling clarity. The face looked more natural in the photograph because the light and dark values on the cloth were already reversed, much like a photographic negative. The discovery did not identify the man. It created a new mystery. How had a negative-like image formed on linen centuries before photography existed? That question would survive every major examination that followed. But first, scientists had to determine whether the image was simply a painting. By 1978, researchers were no longer limited to photographs. They were standing beside the shroud. The Shroud of Turin research project, known as STURPI, brought together specialists in physics, chemistry, imaging, and microscopy for 5 days of direct examination. They began by searching for an artist's materials. STURP reported no brush strokes and no pigments or dyes in quantities sufficient to produce the body image. The coloration did not penetrate the cloth like ordinary paint. It appeared on the outer surfaces of selected linen fibers, while nearby fibers remained unchanged. That made a conventional painting difficult to reconcile with STURP's findings. It did not rule out human manufacture. Microscopist Walter Macrone reached a different conclusion. He identified red ochre and vermilion in particles from adhesive tape samples and argued that the shroud was a medieval artwork. STURP researchers disputed whether those particles formed the body image. The same cloth had produced 2 opposing interpretations. Decades later, no proposed image-making process has gained broad scientific acceptance. So researchers turned to a question that seemed easier to answer. Instead of asking how the image formed, they would ask when the flax was harvested. Radiocarbon dating promised an answer independent of any theory about the image. In 1988, a strip was cut from one corner of the shroud and divided among laboratories in Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich. Each used accelerator mass spectrometry to measure the carbon-14 remaining in the flax fibers. The laboratories also tested control fabrics of known age, which produced the expected results. All 3 then dated the shroud sample to between 1260 and 1390. With 95% confidence, the tested linen appeared to have been produced more than 12 centuries after the death of Jesus. The date also overlapped with the shroud's first confirmed appearance in France during the mid-14th century. For the laboratories, this was strong evidence that the sampled material was medieval. An unexplained medieval image would still not be evidence that the cloth had covered Jesus, but the test examined only one strip from one corner. By itself, it could not prove that every part of the shroud had the same history. The debate therefore moved from the instruments to the sample. Had the laboratories dated original linen, or a corner altered by repair or contamination? That single strip became the center of the controversy. Critics proposed an invisible repair containing newer fibers, contamination from centuries of handling, or chemical effects from the fire of 1532. Some also questioned whether the differences between the 3 laboratories' measurements were larger than expected. The fire explanation was later tested experimentally. Researchers found no measurable carbon exchange capable of shifting the radiocarbon result by centuries. In 2022, researchers applied wide-angle X-ray scattering or WAX, to a shroud thread. By measuring changes in its cellulose, they obtained a result compatible with linen around 2,000 years old, but only under assumed long-term storage conditions. That limitation matters. Cellulose degradation depends heavily on temperature and humidity, while roughly 13 centuries of the shroud's storage history are undocumented. The result was therefore indirect and conditional, not a replacement for radiocarbon dating. Then, in 2026, researchers examined 2 tiny fragments retained from the Arizona sample. They found flax fibers and textile characteristics consistent with published descriptions of the main cloth. They found no cotton, no repair structure, and no significant contamination capable of explaining the medieval date. The fragments represented only a minute part of one corner, so they could not prove that the entire cloth is uniform. But in the material examined, the proposed repair was not found. A new radiocarbon test using several locations would be more decisive. Until then, the 1988 result remains the strongest direct age measurement of the linen. Next came evidence that seemed more personal: the apparent wounds and bloodstains. The figure bears markings interpreted as scourging injuries, wounds at the wrists, punctures around the head, and an injury in the side. Together, they resemble details in the New Testament accounts of the crucifixion. But resemblance is not identification. Researchers tested how blood moves across skin while changing arm positions and surface conditions. Some wrist flows could be reproduced when the arm rotated, and branching patterns formed much more easily on oiled skin. Yet no single position explained every marking. Different flows appeared to require different arm angles or conditions, and some remained difficult to reproduce. The experiments neither authenticated a burial cloth nor demonstrated a forgery. A 2024 forensic study cautioned that the patterns could not reliably establish one complete sequence of events. Even confirmed human blood would establish neither the age of the cloth nor the identity of the injured person. DNA seemed like the next step, but it can identify someone only with a sufficiently reliable sample and verified comparison material. For Jesus, no such reference sample exists. The genetic evidence would reveal someone else. In 2026, researchers analyzed DNA from threads collected from different areas of the shroud in 1978. They found genetic material from humans, plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi, the record of an object exposed to environments and human contact over centuries. Among the human sequences, they reported a likely male contribution and a dominant mitochondrial profile called K1A1B1A. This lineage occurs in some Jewish populations, including Ashkenazi and Sephardic groups, but it is not exclusive to them and cannot establish identity or age. At first, the finding appeared intriguing. Then the molecular evidence changed the story. More than 98% of the analyzed reads showed very low post-mortem damage scores. That was not what researchers would expect from predominantly ancient DNA. Separate contamination analyses also indicated that much of the recovered human material was modern. Researchers compared the dominant profile with Pierluigi Baima Bologna, who had collected the samples in 1978. The mitochondrial profile matched his. A broader kinship analysis was consistent with the DNA coming from Bologna himself, or a first-degree relative. Other variants revealed contact with multiple people. No original human profile could be assigned confidently to the man depicted on the cloth. The DNA had not identified Jesus. It had identified a modern contributor. The test succeeded, but it revealed the history of the sample more clearly than the identity of the image. The shroud entered modern science as a question about Jesus. It emerged as a lesson about what evidence can, and cannot, establish. The strongest direct age measurement places the tested linen in the Middle Ages, consistent with its first confirmed historical appearance. Forensic experiments cannot reconstruct one reliable sequence behind all the apparent blood patterns, and the clearest DNA profile leads to a modern collector, not to the man in the image. The precise process that produced the body image remains unresolved. No explanation has gained broad scientific acceptance, but an unexplained image is not automatically an ancient image. Mystery is not the same as authenticity. Science therefore reaches a limited but important conclusion. The shroud has not been authenticated as the burial cloth of Jesus. That answer may sound less dramatic than proof of either a miracle or a forgery, but it is more honest. The shroud remains a remarkable religious and historical artifact, shaped by belief, controversy, fire, research, and centuries of human contact. If scientists could take new samples, which test would you choose? Radiocarbon dating from several locations, new image analysis, or DNA? Share your choice in the comments and subscribe for more investigations where history meets science.